So you have found momentum with the person you're coaching. It's fantastic. You're seeing those really important behavioural changes and the person's starting to understand how these changes can either hinder or support them with their goals. But how do you keep this momentum up? And how do you take those behaviour changes to the next level? Welcome to Friday Fuel. Today, Kirsten and I are going to take you through the last 2 steps of the Infinitus 5-step transformation coaching model. So far, you've embedded the discovery part of the process, the planning, and obviously those coaching conversations. And now it's time to implement those final 2 stages. And these 2 stages are check-in and reflect.
Check-in for me is one of the most critical parts that is so important to embed, but is the one part that people actually usually always forget. It's as if we think that human beings are like a flip-top head, that you have a conversation with somebody, they nod, yes, they've got it, they might do a practical exercise, and then you let them go, and you just assume that because you've had that one conversation, they've got it, and they've been able to embed it. But let's have a look just at that behaviour design. You know, behaviours don't just change because of a split-second conversation. They change when somebody actually, with intent, goes through and implements it. Now, people are usually very comfortable in their comfort zone, and growth never happens in the comfort zone. So what we need to do as coaches is make sure that we actually extend that comfort zone out, and one of the ways we do that is through the check-in process. So there's 3 tips I want to share with you in the check-in process. The first one is that you should have framed this up in your coaching conversation, which we spoke about last week. So one of the last things you do in your coaching conversation, like we talked about, was you set down the parameters of what that check-in's going to look like. So you would have agreed on the frequency, when it was going to happen, how long it would take, and importantly, what you were going to cover. That means that there's no hidden surprises. When the check-in time comes around, everybody, both parties, are totally prepared for it. And then once you've got that check-in session, which is really exciting, and just remember, and this is my second tip, is make sure that the check-in time that you've agreed to in your coaching conversation has been set at a duration time that is appropriate to the person you're coaching. Now, what I mean by that is that for some people, their learning growth needs to be with short check-ins. And that's because they need a little bit more reinsurance. Maybe they are quite new to this topic. So it's small chunks of time frame. So it might be that you're catching up with them on a daily basis versus somebody you're coaching that's quite familiar with the topic, and you might put it out 3 days or a week before your check-in, but make sure that timing's right. The third one is when you're doing your coaching session, don't just jump in with comments from you. Lead with questions. Lead with those thought-provoking questions that will actually create amazing information. One of the ones that's my absolute favorite is around, what were your wins this week? What did you really love by doing this? You know, how did you find this? Ask these really big open questions to see what they are, but also don't forget in the check-in session to ask them around, what are your hurdles? What did you find difficult or challenging? Because you don't just want to hear the good stuff, you want to hear the challenges so you can do something about it. Now, in this check-in situation, it's getting the questions, it's finding out what to do, but it's also using this time to re-practice, reiterate, and make sure that you're locking down the right behaviours.
Absolutely. And just layering on that with the check-in session, and it's part 5 of the process, is actually looking at reflection. So as we're working through each of our sessions, it's just as important as a coach that we're adapting and we've got that growth mindset so that we're able to help the person we're working with get the best from each of the sessions and all the coaching outcomes of the program, so that everybody is adapting and growing throughout the process. And one of the ways we can go about that reflection process is looking at what's worked, what didn't work, and you can either do that per session or at the end of the actual program. And actually, really importantly, what would we do again if we had experienced that situation, or we were walking into that situation with an individual of a similar personality? And a really neat method that I actually use quite frequently for capturing that information is, when I have a program for someone, I just keep a spreadsheet per session, and I do very quick 5-minute reflections around what worked, what didn't work, and what I might do differently next time, particularly where there are multiple coaching sessions. And that enables me to have a look not only at what has happened, but actually to use that information to feed forward for the person as well. So I can uplift what I might do differently and perhaps tailor the next session ever so slightly or significantly, depending on the person and how it's gone, so that that person can continually get the best from the process, but also I'm learning at the same time, and I can apply those learnings almost straight away.
Isn't that one of your favourite things, Sarah, as well as mine, is that in every coaching session, as a coach, you learn something. And I think that is just such a rewarding part of coaching, and why we love doing what we do is because we're imparting knowledge, but we're also learning, and being open to learn is really important in coaching. You now have our 5 transformational step coaching process or framework. Now with that, what I'd encourage you to do is to go through them, discover, plan, have a robust conversation, check in, and then reflect. Our challenge this week is put this in practice, see how you go, let us know if you've got any questions, and we'd love to have your feedback. Have a great week.